Hello and welcome to a quick tutorial. This is going to be a tutorial about using Blender to create and 3D print objects. It's extremely easy, and I think more people would do it if they only knew how. Right? So, and actually this is targeted at my younger brother, who I got a 3D printer for, and he just hasn't used it enough. And I realize that's probably because it's a little difficult to do this sort of stuff if you've never been exposed to it, right? So this is going to hopefully get that out of the way. So first thing, how do you get Blender? Blender is free. You can just Google the word Blender like I just did, go to the website, click the download link. Just make sure if you're on Mac, you get the Mac one, and if you're on Windows, you get the Windows one. So go ahead and follow all the install guide. It should be pretty straightforward. I'm not going to waste time on that. Once you have that done, open up Blender. You should see this. Just go ahead and click General right off the bat. And now what you're going to be seeing here is going to be likely very overwhelming if you've never seen it before. This is called the Viewport. This is where you're actually viewing the object that you're working on. It gives you this default cube. And then up along the top, this is gonna be really surface level, very streamlined, just for the purpose of using this for getting an object into a 3D printable format, right? So up along here, you can see all these different tabs. These are different things you can do to your objects, but obviously animation, shading, texture paint, you don't need that stuff. Really, we're only gonna be focusing on these first 2 or 3 right here, right? And then, so navigation, right? Well, actually here, we're in object mode right now, you can see, which means we can click on different objects. Right now we have 3. We have our cube, we have the light source, but we don't care about that, so we can just delete it. It doesn't matter if you delete it or not. It won't matter literally at all. And here's our viewports. This is where we would be looking if we were in an animation. And there, I just did something new, right? I moved. See how I'm looking at it from different angles? To do that, I am pushing in the middle mouse button and just dragging around. Another useful one would be holding Control and the middle mouse button. You can zoom in and out, and holding Shift and the middle mouse button lets you pan around your object, right? Awesome. So let's try and actually make something. So we're gonna have to go into edit mode, remember up here, and I'm gonna try and make a fish, right? And so right off the bat, I need to make sure I am selecting faces, because I can either be selecting points, edges, or faces. I'll select a face, and I'm just gonna try and maybe make this part the head, and you know, work with me right now, right? I'm trying to make it concise for a tutorial. It's not going to be the most beautiful fish, maybe. So we'll E to extrude, S will let me scale, and I'm going to be saying out the keyboard shortcuts as I go, so hopefully that'll help be a little bit easier. So then E to extrude again, and this time we'll go S to scale, although perhaps we would rather not have this square cross section, so this time I'll go S to scale, and I'll scale it only in the, you can see I can lock it. By pushing Z, I'm locking it to only scale in the Z. If I push X, it'll only scale in the X, which I can't do right now, right, because that would be normal to the face. And if I push Y, I can scale it in the Y direction. So I'm thinking maybe more Y. And then we'll do E to extrude, S to scale. This time we'll scale it into Z because we're trying to make a tail. Maybe one more E to extrude, and then maybe we will just leave it there. Now let's try and give him a fin, maybe. So I'll click this face. I'll go E to extrude, S to scale, though, this time first, and I'll pull it in a little bit, and then now I will go E to extrude. It'll, by default, just go normal to the face, I believe. And then now perhaps I want to tilt that a little bit, maybe. So I'll push R to rotate, and I'd like to rotate it around the Y axis. So I'll tilt it a little bit like that, you see. And then I'll go E to extrude once more, maybe. I mean, you can see. It just took a moment to look at how my fish is actually turning out. E to extrude, S to scale. You guys get it. There's his fin. Woohoo! Look at him go. All right. And now one more thing before I show you how to turn this into a 3D printable file that I think could be useful, because I think it's really easy to design quickly like this, but is really blocky and maybe not your taste. So one thing you can do is go and add a modifier. So we'll click Modifier, Add Modifier, and the only one we're going to worry about is Subdivision Surface Modifier. And you can see sort of from the picture right there what it's going to do. It's going to try and approximate hard edges into sort of more rounded ones. So render, you don't have to worry about that. Over here in the little tickers we can kind of mess with on the modifier. Render we don't care about because we're only going to be 3D printing it, right? We're not rendering it. Viewport, that's what we see here, right? So if we tick that up, you can quickly see sort of exactly what it looks like, what it's doing, right? So maybe I'll just put it on like 3 or 4 or whatever. And then you just go ahead and you have to be in object mode to actually apply it. We'll hit apply, and here is our wonderful fish, right? So I want to 3D print it. I can go File, Export, STL, right? Now some of these others might work with your 3D printer, but I know STL will definitely work. Here's the one I made when I was practicing this, so we'll save it as coolfish.stl, export it, and boom, we now have a cool fish ready for 3D printing. So let's say perhaps you don't like that method very much and maybe you're interested more in something else. This would be that alternative. This is called Sculpt Mode. So to do this, I'm just going to go File, New, and I'll just open up a sculpting file, because then by default it gives me this nice cube. If I push Tab, you can see it just gives you a ton of vertices to work with right off the bat. So this would be something if you're trying to make something, I don't know, more artsy and with less of a need for precision, right? Which is sort of what a hobbyist 3D printer might be wanting, right? So you can see on this side of the screen, there's all these options. They're pretty self-explanatory. I would just recommend experimenting with them. They're quite fun to mess with sometimes. Like blob, flatten, pinch, grab. I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory, and just mess with them and you'll kind of figure them out, right? Right off the bat, you'll notice up here there's these are symmetry options. So we have X symmetry, X-axis symmetry on, right, by default. You can also do Y and Z. To show you what that looks like, we'll try maybe, yeah. So you can see when I turn on one side, whatever I do on one side will happen to the other, right? So right now, all I'm doing is using the blob tool. I'm probably only going to use the blob tool just for the sake of this, but immediately uses the inflate tool. But yeah, we'll see. So you can see you can kind of add material to it or blob it out or mess with it. You could... and if you do it in the center, you'll see how the symmetry works. Another useful tip is if you hold Control while using it, it will do the opposite of whatever the brush is supposed to be doing normally. So right now I'm kind of making a little indent, right? I'm removing material. So now maybe I won't hold Control and I'll give him an eyeball. Good grief. Hold Control maybe, give him a little smile. And boom, we've got ourselves a head. You can see this is obviously very simplified. You can clearly do a lot more. One useful thing that I will point out while using the flatten tool is you can increase the radius of your brush, right? That's quite useful to know about. Maybe flatten his cheeks a little bit. I can increase the strength of it to make it, do more when I'm using it. And then we can go ahead, we could turn off symmetry, and you can sort of see how that would look. Oh gosh, let's turn down the radius. And you can see now when I affect one side, it does not affect the other, right? So, good grief. Okay, so I want to export it, and I can just go straight to STL once again. Do keep in mind when you're using this sort of thing, you could potentially end up doing something like this, right? You don't want, obviously, a 3D printer is going to have a hard time if you got all these weird sort of vertices, and you're not going to know what to do with that. So try and avoid stuff like that if you can. I was just using Control Z there. All right, and that's sculpting. And just to make sure there's no confusion by what I mean about ready to 3D print, I mean ready to put into your slicer, right? The translator from your files to your 3D printer. So I'm using Cura. Cura's free. I just downloaded it just for this video, just to show you. So you can go ahead, open up your STL file. And now you might experience something like this. Where is it? What is going on? I just opened it. I just made it. This guy on YouTube told me it would work, and it didn't. Where is it? Well, it turns out the scale is wrong. I didn't mention much about scale because it is so easy to just select your object in your slicer and just scale it up. We'll say maybe like 500, maybe. No, we want it a little bit bigger, right? We're gonna give this to. Oh no, I saved it with the messed up part. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend 3D printing this because I saved it with that out. But so you can see you can scale it up quite easily. You can rotate it around. If you're gonna design like this and you're gonna have all this sort of stuff, you're gonna have to use support material under there, obviously, which is fine. I prefer not to. But it's fine. It'll turn out, you know, whatever. But if you can get a flat surface on the surface that mates with the printing bed, you'll have a much better time. So then go ahead and slice her up and print it, and there you go. I hope this helps. I hope this helps you do something creative. Enjoy. What a weird ending.